Hi, welcome to another ASMR video. In my last video, I rambled on about Stoicism, or at least a very specific part of Stoicism, my thoughts about that. And I was going to try and think of something specific to talk about today. I was thinking about maybe carrying on with Stoicism, talking a little bit more about that, or finding anything else to talk about. There are many different topics that come to mind, but to be honest with you, I'm a little bit frazzled today, so I don't know if I can really be bothered to focus too much on one particular topic. However, I recently had an interesting idea to write down in the notes of my phone any thoughts or ideas that I have when I have them. Because a lot of the times I will just spontaneously go down a little rabbit hole in my head of ideas, and I'll think about them and then I'll forget them, or I won't remember them until a long time later. And so I thought it would be interesting if I just wrote them down, and then obviously I realized that I'm doing these videos, and so maybe reading out the weird things that I've written would be interesting. I might paraphrase some of these because they're a little bit cringy when I read them as I wrote them, but the first thing on the list is, what do you have to gain from taking life so seriously? Nothing. So that's the first little sentence that I wrote down, which I think ironically is very closely linked to Stoicism, and I think it's something I have to constantly remind myself of. Oh yeah, by the way, once again I apologize if you hear any background noise, but the outside is loud. So I have to sort of every now and then really remind myself and reinforce this idea that nothing really matters. And so it's not really worth taking anything too seriously. Of course there is a limit to that, idea, because if you take that too far, then you're basically suicidal. But I think it's a fine line, and it's interesting to go through life and try and find the perfect balance for you, in terms of how seriously you should take life, and then even more complicated, how you should take each of the endless amounts of things that exist within life. And I also don't think that it's possible to ever get to a point where you found the perfect balance. I think in reality, that perfect balance, if it even exists, is something that is going to constantly change throughout your life, depending on how your life goes, and who you are as a person in any given moment. But I think it's definitely, at least for me, or anyone really that I guess might ever deal with issues psychologically or emotionally or whatever, reaffirming this idea that you shouldn't take life too seriously is obviously very simple, and as with anything philosophical, easier said than done, but definitely worth reminding yourself of. The next thing that I wrote down is a bit of a paragraph, and again, I just randomly and spontaneously wrote these things down on random days, so I didn't sit down and write all of these in one go. These were usually in response to some kind of thought that I had in my head. Okay, And I haven't read these back either, so I hope they're not going to be too weird. Then again, it could be interesting for me to read something and then sort of reevaluate it. And it might be interesting for me to see whether I disagree or still agree with the ideas that I've had in the past week or two. Anyway, so this one is, I am the center of my universe and I can't help it. Everyone is the center of their own universe, because the universe is completely different to each individual. My interpretation of everything that exists could be completely different to some random Chinese kid's interpretation. If my brother got shot in the face tomorrow, my universe would be completely effed. The Chinese kid's universe would be exactly the same. Everything that exists outside of my mind is external to me. It doesn't really make logical sense that something external could be more important to me than something internal. Especially because whether anything actually means anything is again just my interpretation of that thing. Something is only ever important to me if I think it's important. If I died, that thing wouldn't be important to me anymore. Therefore, everything that matters or is important in my universe exists internally, in my mind. Nothing inherently matters. It's all just perception. So of course I'm the center of my universe. So once again, that seems to be very closely linked to this idea of Stoicism. I think I must have been writing these things down similar to the time when I actually recorded my first of these videos. But I think I also, if I remember correctly, wrote that down in response to a conversation that I had with someone. So I think maybe we were kind of talking about selfishness compared to selflessness. And I'm generally a pretty self-absorbed, self-centered, selfish kind of person. And so I think maybe we were having some kind of debate about me being the center of my universe. And I think one of the points I made was just kind of something along the lines of course I'm the center of my universe. How could I not be? And how that then relates to this kind of hierarchy of who matters in your life. And in my mind, it seems weird to put somebody other than yourself higher than yourself on this priority list, because everything that you love about them, everything that makes them so great that you think they're more important than you, is only that way because you've interpreted it that way, and your interpretation of that comes from within yourself. So everything in the entire universe is just a projection of your mind. It's your interpretation of those things, including all the people that you love so much. So it seems weird to put one of these projections higher than the thing that is projecting, if that makes sense. Now obviously, once again, this is a bit of a cynical outlook on life and people, because I just refer to loved ones as projections, which is a bit of a psychopathic way of looking at things, but I think that it is an interesting thing to think about, the fact that it's in a sense a little bit illogical to put anybody above yourself on this little priority list of who matters most in your life. But a lot of that, like I said, is just very closely linked to Stoicism, which I already talked about in my last video. I think I was thinking a lot about similar thoughts around that time. Right, so the next thing I wrote is another little paragraph. Yeah, I'm going to talk about it. I really want to stay away from talking about anything that's too controversial, or saying, bad words or whatever, just because these are made for YouTube. And so I don't want them to be demonetized. Not that I'm expecting to make any money from these videos, especially not anytime soon, so I'm just going to go on and say it anyway. I mean, there's nothing too bad, it's just I'm using terms that are a little bit, Anyway, so 2,000 years ago, slavery being okay and normal was probably the opinion of most people alive in the world. 200 years ago, being gay, being disgusting and evil was probably the opinion of most people alive in the world. How naive is it that anybody believes their opinion is right or good or correct just because potentially millions of other, can't say that, people agree with you? In 1,000 years, people will probably look back at this society and think that we were stupid and uncivilized and unenlightened, just like we do to every society that came before us. I think this was, again, after a conversation I had with someone where we were talking about normality, we were talking about things that are normal and common, we were talking about kind of, the opinion of the masses. Oh my god, my camera's going to run out of battery again. This camera's battery life is unbelievable. Okay. So, it's actually been a while since I now charged my camera. I apologise because there's going to be some kind of awkward breaks in this one video, but if I remember correctly, the last thing I was talking about was this thing I wrote down in my notes about how naive people are to ever assume that their opinion is right or correct or good in any way, which I think is a very interesting thought. And of course it's kind of difficult to deny for a lot of things that they're, bad or good, especially some of the very extreme things in society. But I just think that, as my notes say, it would be very naive of anybody to assume that they are right. That you, out of the billions of humans that have ever existed, are somehow part of this elite minority that have, figured it out. Or even to assume that our society, out of the thousands of societies and civilizations that have existed in history, are somehow the ones that have figured it out. And that's the weird thing whenever it comes to things to do with morality or politics even. People always act as if they're right or they're correct or something, and they're not, and it's not their fault that they're not, but you just can't be correct with an opinion. It's nothing more than opinion, no matter how many points you think you have, no matter how many people you think you have agreeing with you, it doesn't make your opinion anything more than an opinion. So I could say that I think this, and this is right. This is clearly the best opinion. It's correct because of A, B, and C. And if anybody disagrees with me, it means that they think that, and that is really wrong and bad because of X, Y, Z. And I think that's just kind of a ridiculous mindset to have, and of course everyone's going to have their opinions. I have my opinions. But I just think it's a weird mentality to have, to think that you are right. And don't get me wrong, I'm very egotistical with my opinions. I kind of have this mindset that, I'm a genius and everyone else is an idiot. That's why they disagree with me. Because I have very kind of out-of-the-box ideas. And I have a bit of a strange way of thinking compared to anyone I've ever met, really. And you can be confident in your opinion. And you can, of course, list all of the reasons why you think the way you think. And that's fine. But I would never be so bold as to claim that my opinions are somehow correct or right or superior to anyone else's opinions in any way. They're just my opinions. And of course, because they're mine, they make the most amount of sense to me. I think back in the day I used to spend a lot of time trying to, convince people of my way of thinking and convince people that, my ideas and my thoughts, my philosophies were right, and I'd sit down and I'd rant on and on and on. I'd say, okay, this is one point, this is one reason, I'm going to explain it, and then this is the next reason I'm going to explain that, and this is the next reason I explain that, trying to convince people of my opinions, And of course, I still have those opinions. And I still have opinions that are very different to most people's. That doesn't, necessarily mean that they're right. Well, so much better. It just means that they're mine. So I think that's a very interesting thought. But I think the issue is that if you're the kind of person that ever accepts this thought, then you're also the kind of person that in reality probably not necessarily. It's an interesting one. It's an interesting one when you apply it to the ideas of politics and morality, because if you really accept that point of view, what I wrote down in my notes, and you kind of realize that debating and arguing about these things is kind of redundant and pointless. There's no point trying to debate with someone if they have a different opinion to you, because if you accept that you're not right or wrong and they're not right or wrong, and you just have two different opinions, then what are you arguing over? I suppose the idea is to try and convince that person to drop their opinion and accept your opinion, which I guess is exactly what politics is all about. But then if you combine it with many other ideas that I have in terms of not really caring what other people think, then you would have no desire for them to accept your opinions. Anyway, I've got another one. This is actually a pretty long paragraph. And I believe, looking at this is a little mental exercise that I go through whenever I'm struggling, emotionally or psychologically. If I'm ever going through something, I will go through this little mental exercise. Okay, I'll just read it out and see what happens. My emotional and psychological problems are a small part of what make up my existence. They mean nothing. I am one individual out of 8 billion individuals. I mean nothing. Therefore, my problems mean less than nothing. Humans are one species out of trillions of species on Earth. Humans mean nothing. Therefore, as an individual, I mean less than nothing. Therefore, my problems mean less than nothing. Earth is one planet out of trillions of planets, moons, stars, black holes, gas clouds, and who knows what else. Earth means nothing. Therefore, the human species means less than nothing. Therefore, I as an individual mean less than nothing. Therefore, my problems mean less than nothing. Everything that exists in the universe right now exists all at once in this one moment in time, out of an infinite amount of moments in time before this one and after this one. Therefore, everything... Wait, hang on a second. Sorry, I fucked that up so bad. Therefore, the universe means nothing. Therefore, the earth means less than nothing. Therefore, the human species means less than nothing. Therefore, I as an individual mean less than nothing. Therefore, my problems mean F all. So, the whole idea behind that, it was a bit convoluted, it got kind of ridiculous towards the end. The whole idea about that is, I suppose I could sum it up by saying it's about trying to gain perspective. Usually when people think about perspective, they talk about standing in someone else's shoes, which is, I think, a very effective technique. If I am going through some issues in life here, all I gotta do is, envision myself in the shoes of some, starving African kid, and all of a sudden my problems don't seem so big. But I think a combination of that being a bit cliche and me being a bit of a mean person and not really caring about other people, it loses some of its effectiveness over time. And so I think I took that idea of perspective and I kind of went a bit crazy with it. And so in a way, what I'm doing here is I'm trying to look at me, my problems, what I'm dealing with in that given moment from the perspective of the universe, or from just a completely neutral perspective. And I'm kind of stepping out of my own shoes and adopting this perspective of the universe, let's say. And I'm looking at myself, and I suppose if I was going to continue to explain it, and maybe show you how I actually envision it in my mind, what I would do is I would say that as the universe, I'm looking at myself, and I envision myself as, let's say, a silhouette. I'm just a silhouette of myself, right? And then inside this silhouette, there's sort of this sort of red circle, maybe. And this red circle represents all of my problems and my issues and whatever it is I'm dealing with in that moment. And so I'm looking at this from the perspective of the universe, and I'm realizing that this little red dot is only a tiny little part of what makes up my entire existence. Of course, my entire existence being every part of me physically, every part of me psychologically and emotionally, and every moment I've ever experienced in the past and every moment I ever will experience in the future, the impact that I have on the potential of the people in my life, etc., etc. So my existence is this huge, massive, complicated thing. And my problems in that moment are just this tiny little red dot. And so from the perspective of the universe, when you're not trapped in this little bubble that you put yourself in, then you realize that those problems aren't that big. But then, to take it a step further, you can take a step back, and all of a sudden, this silhouette of me zooms out. And next to the silhouette of me is a silhouette of another person, and then the silhouette of another person, and it goes on and on and on in that direction, and on and on and on in that direction, and then there's another row on top of that, and another row on top of that, and then below that, and I zoom out and out and out all the way until I can see 8 billion silhouettes. Of course, I can't really comprehend what 8 billion silhouettes looks like, but that's the idea. And all of a sudden I'm looking at these 8 billion people, understanding that they're all just as complex and complicated as I was, and they all have their own little red dots. And I'm looking around and I realize that I've lost myself. I've realized that looking at these 8 billion people, I can't pick out myself. I don't know where I am in this huge mess of 8 billion people from the perspective of the universe. And in reality, there's so many of these little silhouettes. If I just flicked my silhouette away, if my silhouette ceased to exist, there would be no impact. Nothing would change. This map of 8 billion people would look exactly the same, whether I was there or not, because I'm just one out of 8 billion. And so all of a sudden, sorry if you can hear that outside. And so all of a sudden, my entire existence seems insignificant in the context of everyone who exists in the world. And if my entire existence, which before seemed like this huge, crazy, complicated thing, if my entire existence means nothing, then that little red dot means less than nothing, right? And then once again, you can take it a step further by taking a step back, and all of these silhouettes, these 8 billion silhouettes, merge into one silhouette of a human, let's say. And then next to that is a silhouette of an elephant, and the silhouette of a bee, and the silhouette of a tree, and it goes on and on and on in that direction, and on and on and on in that direction, and there's another row above that, and then below that, and it goes on endlessly, and you have trillions of different species of life that exist on this planet. And once again, I'm looking at this huge, uncomprehendable map of silhouettes of life, and I realized that if I flick away the human silhouette, what happens? What really changes in the map of this, I guess what represents life? Nothing. The human race doesn't really mean much. It's not really that big of a deal in the context of life when you take into consideration the just uncomprehendable level at which it exists. So then I'm thinking, okay, well, if the entire human race is irrelevant, if the entire human race means nothing, then I as an individual mean less than nothing. And if I as an individual mean less than nothing, then my problems mean less than nothing. So you see how it goes. And once again, I take another step back, and all of these different trillions of silhouettes of the different species of life, they all merge into one. And they merge into a silhouette of Earth. And they represent all life on Earth, or everything that exists on Earth. And next to Earth you have a silhouette of our moon. And next to that you have a silhouette of Saturn. And it goes on and on and on. All the planets, all the moons, all the stars, all the gas clouds, all the black holes, all the who knows what else is out there. And now I have this huge, massive, uncomprehendable map of everything that exists in our universe. Again, just unbelievably uncomprehendable from my position. There's no way I could ever really know everything that exists in our universe. But I'm attempting from the perspective of the universe itself to comprehend that. And I realized that if you flick Earth away, there's no effect, then nothing matters. If Earth blew up right now, in the context of the entire universe, that means nothing. Planets probably blow up every few seconds, and so again, you ask yourself, if it's that insignificant, then Earth means nothing. And if Earth means nothing, that means that all life on Earth means less than nothing. If all life on Earth means less than nothing, humans mean less than. If humans mean less than, then I as an individual mean less than, and my problems mean even less than that. And then the final stage of it, which blows everything else out of the water, is this idea that every single thing, all of this uncomprehendable level of existence that we have here, all of it exists right now in this one moment in time right here. And so I imagine this moment in time as a vertical line, and then next to that is another vertical line, and then right next to that is another vertical line, and each of these vertical lines represent moments in time, and these vertical lines go on endlessly in that direction and endlessly in that direction, and you just have this just infinite sort of train of lines, infinite train of moments that never started and will never end. And you realize, once you're looking at this infinite train, that if you flick off one of those lines, it doesn't mean anything. If you flick off 1,000 of those lines, 1,000,000 of those lines, 1,000,000,000, 1,000,000,000,000 of these lines, it doesn't mean anything, because now we're dealing with infinity. Infinity is so uncomprehendibly bigger than any quantifiable number that it doesn't matter how many lines you knock down, it doesn't mean anything. It's nothing. And so if the entire universe ceased to exist right now, and then there was just nothing for trillions of years, it wouldn't matter. Because in time, it will eventually start again. Something will happen. And even if it doesn't, time itself still exists. And so if now all of a sudden every single thing that exists in the universe means nothing, then you go back down the sort of ladder of scale. And, if you spend enough time in this mindset of the universe, and then eventually come back to your own shoes, then all of a sudden, you were like, wait, what were my problems again? Whatever it is that you were upset or depressed or angry about, whatever life problem you're dealing with, whatever stresses you got, all of a sudden they seem so pathetically insignificant. And I understand, like with many ways that my mind works, you know, if you really adopt this mentality, it can kind of go sideways, it can go a bit south, and it can get a bit depressing in of itself, because you sort of think, well, what's the point? My life means nothing. And I understand that, which is why, you know, I don't really think that this mindset that I have a lot of the time is helpful to a lot of people. But to me personally, it honestly lifts a weight off my shoulders. It really eases my mind. I suppose it's difficult for me to really explain why, but it does. And that's a very specific mind exercise, I guess you could call it, that I do, what I just explained. Now I believe I'm about to hit 30 minutes on this video, so we'll leave it there. The last 20 minutes really flew by, I'm not gonna lie. I enjoy making these videos. I hope that they're still ASMR. I hope that they're still relaxing enough for you to be able to fall asleep to or whatever. I know that what I'm talking about sometimes maybe could even be depressing to a lot of you. And I know that sometimes I get a little bit, maybe not excited, but I get a bit into it, you know, and when I'm explaining things, I will potentially be raising my voice or talking very fast, which isn't really the most relaxing thing to listen to. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed one way or another, and I definitely will be making another one of these for those of you that care. Bye.